And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather for Monday morning looks like this along the southeast coast, IFR, on up into the northern inner channels there and over to about Yakutat. Some IFR for the North Gulf Coast, some IFR for the Alaska Range, as well as the Southwest Mountains here. Some areas of IFR for Kodiak Island into the Pacific side of the Aleutian Range. Then a bigger area of IFR out here sitting in the Bering Sea, extending southward there, almost to Unalaska Island, but covering Unimak Island and the Pribilofs up to St. Lawrence Island. Marginal for the Aleutians, some IFR up along and mostly off the Arctic coast there, could clip the central coastal areas. Otherwise pretty good in the interior, mostly VFR. For the afternoon, interior looking really good, VFR flying, except south and east of the Alaska Range here and over the southwest interior and the southwest coast, marginal VFR, and isolated IFR here for the North Gulf Coast. IFR still holding over the same area of the southeast coast there, especially over the northern inside waters. IFR farther off the Arctic coast, and now marginal VFR hitting areas of the Arctic coast, meaning VFR in other locations. And all the IFR here out over the Bering Sea, north and west of the Aleutians. And moving on to Tuesday morning, big area of IFR now over the Bering Sea right up to Nunivak Island, almost to St. Lawrence Island, definitely covering the Pribilofs down to the western Alaska Peninsula. Most of the Aleutians, IFR for the morning hours, and IFR Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, east and southern Kodiak Island, right on up along the Kenai Peninsula there into western Prince William Sound. Marginal VFR up to the Alaska Range into the central southern Copper River Basin, and again mostly off the Arctic coast up there, North Slope, Brooks Range into the interior looking really good. Solid IFR in the forecast for the Panhandle from Yakutat on down toward Dixon Entrance. That burns off in the afternoon, leaving just some marginal VFR in the central and south coastal areas, but good VFR over the inside waters. Some IFR here, Prince William Sound, and that's about it. Otherwise, the interior looking really good. VFR all the way up to the Arctic coast, marginal VFR there. Huge area of IFR here from the Bering Strait, all of the Bering Sea, clipping the Yukon Delta coast, Nunivak Island, the IFR Pribilofs, and west of Nikolsky out to Shimianatu, probably the Komodorskis, all in the IFR zone. And from there, looking at passes, Anatuvik, marginal VFR for the day Monday, as is Adigan. And Lake Clark and Merrill, occasional marginal VFR, trending better into the afternoon possibly. Rainy VFR trending toward marginal VFR due to some afternoon buildups. Windy though, VFR. Eastern Alaska Range, VFR for both Isabel and Mentasta. And for Tanita, optimistically, VFR. And for Portage, marginal VFR at times, maybe a little lower in the morning hours, but better in the afternoon. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR to IFR, some moisture slips on up from the south. And for the freezing levels, 4,000 feet here over the southeast Bering Sea into western Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, and then about 6,000 feet here over the southwest part of the state. 8,000 to 9,000 feet over the north slope and the eastern interior, and about 10,000 to 12,000 feet or so for the southeast coast. And for icing, the greatest threat got a, southerly flow here, this moisture keeping the western part of the state in an elevated icing potential threat situation there of isolated moderate at worst here. Areas of, it's all kind of broken up, so nothing really solid until you get down to the Alaska Peninsula into Kodiak Island. And probably a little bit greater threat of some moderate rime icing will be along the north coast of the Panhandle. And to jet stream winds here, southeast interior, southerly 60 to 70 knots. And otherwise, stronger winds well south of Kodiak Island. And for 9,000 feet, 40 to 45 knot winds here on the backside of this low off the southwest coast. Pretty light here, Gulf of Alaska, central eastern interior, but southwest up to 40 knots for the northern Panhandle. 3,000 feet, lighter winds here, maybe 20 to maybe 30 knots there along the central coast of the Panhandle. Some west-southwesterlies, 35 to 45 knots, strongest there on the western Arctic coast. Turbulence, southwest interior moderate turbulence, Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians.